Hey, hey, thank you very much, and welcome back to the NEAF talks for this afternoon. I want to welcome you, and I also want to take this time to extend a big thanks to Celestron for promoting this next speaker. It's truly an extraordinary opportunity. I'd like to give them a big shout out and applause because this truly is going to be great. Our next speaker, I have to say, maybe with the exception of the astronauts, has probably traveled the longest distance to get here. Okay? And with that, I want to say that this opportunity that he has to offer us is extremely important, and it's a great opportunity, what he has to share with us. He is an accomplished imager. He shares a lot of his intelligence and learnings online through various media methods. And I would like to take this time to welcome to NEAF, Mr. Dylan O'Donnell. Thank you. Thank you, Dylan.
Wow. There are way too many people here for this talk. Thank you for having me, and it's a real pleasure to be here at NEAF and meeting so many people. I feel like sometimes I'm in the backyard twiddling knobs and pushing buttons and ranting at a camera in the dark, and it's really comforting to know that I'm not the only weirdo, that I'm here with a room full of weirdos. When Celestron told me that I could come here and give this talk, and they gave me the brief, I had to ask them. I said, let me get this straight. You're going to pay for me to come to New York and talk to a room full of mostly Americans about how good I've got it in my hemisphere? I'm born for this. This is my shtick. This is my whole shtick. I was born for this moment. This is fantastic. So the title of the talk, of course, is The Tour of the Southern Skies. But as I was writing the talk, in my head, the working title was, my hemisphere could beat up your hemisphere any day of the week. I should also ask, can anyone understand a word I'm saying? Yeah. I realized that my accent's a little different, and I wasn't sure if it was like a New York thing, whether I just wasn't speaking loud enough, or if I really do sound like Crocodile Dundee. But why should you care what I have to say at all? At the end of the day, I'm just a guy with a telescope, just a guy who walked into a store and bought a telescope. If you Google my name, I've worked really hard over the years to make sure that I come up first, and I've been optimizing those results. I ego Google regularly, have my news alert set up. Unfortunately, there's one guy that will come up. He's an English footballer called Dylan O'Donnell. I've been working really hard to edge him off the page. He's recently changed his name, so I like to think that I've had something to do with that. But I don't want to bore you with just a normal slideshow. There's nothing more boring than talking about someone's travels or someone's slides in general. I have a master's in information technology, so my background is in computer science, and I'm halfway through an astronomy degree. But ultimately, I am just like you guys. I'm just someone who bought a telescope, and I really have to thank Celestron for the support they've been giving me over the years. This is just my Instagram, basically. This is the Instagram for the last couple of years, so you can see the improvement and the progression. This is a couple of years old now, but I've taken a lot of photos, and that's probably the only thing that really qualifies me to be here, other than the fact that I live in the Southern Hemisphere. That qualifies me more than most of you guys. I do have a couple of APODs. I don't really do it for APODs and award ceremonies and things like that. I give away my work for free as well. You can choose to license your work as Creative Commons, but I choose public domain because with public domain, people don't have to give you credit. They can take that image and they can use it for anything. And that means sometimes my images get taken and they get put on, flat Earth stuff, and they get put on anything. But it also gets picked up by news organisations. It gets picked up by all sorts of outlets who feel free when they're running to a deadline to use my images. So if you are an astrophotographer yourself, I do highly recommend considering public domain. Get your images out there for free. We're competing with NASA, and they give their images out for free. So I don't see why I can put a price on my stuff. I'm lucky enough to live in Byron Bay in Australia. It's this beautiful hippie paradise on the easternmost point of Australia. It's it's a kind of wealthy paradise now too. We've got people like Matt Damon and Miley Cyrus and Chris Hemsworth living in their multi-million-dollar mansions out there. But it has this real hippie ethos about the whole place. It's a really beautiful place to live. It's still illegal to smoke weed over there, but everyone does. But we are lucky to have the first sunrise and the first sunset in the country because we are that easternmost place. It's a special place for a few reasons. Because of this hippie ethos it has, it's very anti-development. So there are no buildings over 3 stories. So you can sit on the beach and look back and you just see trees. It just feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. There's only 6,000 people living there, but we have 2 million people just coming through the town every year. Someone in the 1990s decided to bury the street lighting, and this had this cool effect where you're in the urban streets and the street lights are just gone. You can see houses and you can see the Milky Way over the top of it. So very low light pollution. They don't like capitalism generally there, so they won't let McDonald's move into town, for example. But they're also afraid of fluoride and vaccinating their children, so it's a bit weird. It's a bit like San Francisco, where wealthy hippies reckon they can be a bit anti-science, which is a shame. And it's ironic because I care about science and I care about astronomy, and I'm the astronomer in Byron Bay. But when I tell people that I'm an astronomer, they say, "Oh, that's lovely, I'm a Virgo." They really don't care. So these are my skies. This is most of the reason that my photos are okay. I have good skies. I estimate for my house I'm probably Bortle 2.5, which is in between a rural location and a truly dark sky. The town has a small glow, and that's certainly a factor. But when you're looking east, you're looking towards nothing. There's nothing for miles and miles, like 8,000 miles. Nothing's there. So here I am, just some guy living in a hippie paradise, and I walk into a store one day and I buy a little Celestron 4SE, which at the time I thought was a really expensive telescope, and I was in for a surprise. And here's an image that I took riding piggyback on that telescope. I was doing everything wrong, so this is one of my early images, but you can see a really dense part of the Milky Way. But I wanted to show you this because I wanted to show you that even though I didn't know what I was doing and I was just starting out, it's super easy. It's just super easy to go wrong down there. So this is with a cheap DSLR camera, 4 45-second shots stitched together, showing from the core of Sagittarius all the way to Scorpio and Carina, and just blazingly bright. This is high above us, so it's not over on the horizon, it's like right up. So it's beautiful to photograph. The core area rises over the ocean and just goes straight up and then comes right down over the west. So you've got a huge segment of the night to try different things. And the Dutch astronomer Bart Bok, Dutch-American astronomer, he's famous for saying all the best stuff is in the Southern Hemisphere. Bart Bok is the guy who coined the term Bok globules. So if you've ever seen nebulas with Bok globules in them, they're named after that guy. And it's always nice when an American tells us that we're better. Now that might come as a surprise to Charles Messier, who observed and catalogued mostly from France. And you can see that he left a huge gaping hole in the middle, or the bottom, I should say, of his catalogue. He basically left us off the catalogue, which is sort of funny for us in Australia. We know that if something that we're photographing doesn't have an M designation, that it's something that you guys can't see. So we lean heavily on the NGC and the IC catalogue. Now this is me underneath Carina. I'm well and truly in love with Carina. I was calling Carina my girlfriend for a long time. She's really very easy to fall in love with. And if you look at Wikipedia, it tells you that Carina was discovered in 1752 by a French dude, which is, I guarantee you, it wasn't discovered by a French dude in 1752. It's been there the whole time. It's literally the brightest, biggest thing you can see in the sky. And we've known about it for a long time before that. So yeah, naturally it features in Aboriginal history and Aboriginal astronomy and tradition. Now I know you guys in America love big things. We're all about big things here. I don't know how you guys deal with those medium-sized servings. They feel like they are bigger than my internal organs can handle. But we like big things in Australia too. So we have the big rolling pin, the big sheep, the big banana, and the big prawn, which are classic highway icon truck stops. In fact, those are the directions to my house from Melbourne, if you ever need to know how to go. So, let's go through what you can see. Bullet point list for the Southern Hemisphere. We have the brightest, biggest nebula visible from Earth, which is Carina, of course. We have the brightest, biggest naked eye galaxy, which is a large Magellanic Cloud. You don't need any equipment to see that. The brightest, biggest part of the Milky Way, the core, of course. The darkest, biggest dark nebulas, the Coalsack Nebula, Emu, Rho Ophiucus, and a whole slew of dark nebulas through those regions. And we have the brightest, biggest globular cluster, if you're into globular clusters. And we still get to see Orion upside down compared to what you guys see it, but we still get that too. So we get a lot of good stuff. This is a photo that I took from Western Australia. An important aspect of astrophotography, especially this wide field Milky Way stuff, is the landscape. And you guys here have a very diverse landscape. You guys have the Grand Canyon, you have mountains, you have snow, you have desert, you've got everything. And Australia has a lot of that too. We just don't have the big mountains that you guys have. And the pinnacles in Western Australia are beautiful. And none of this is locked off. You can just drive your car into it at any time of the year, any time of night, and just get out of the car and take photos. This image is interesting because I made a mistake, a beginner's error on this image. There's a setting in your camera where you can turn down the size of the image, and what that effectively does is bin the image, so everything becomes twice as bright, and that's what happened here. But I think it really illustrates just how bright and beautiful we have it down there. You've got the Coalsack Nebula up here, and of course the large Magellanic Cloud and the small Magellanic Cloud there. It's a beautiful example as well of constellations. I've always thought of as a bit weird. Maybe it's because I'm a new astronomer. I don't really care about the constellations. I know that's a bit weird to say. But when you're out there on a dark sky, good luck finding a constellation. You literally cannot make them out. Now, sometimes, and I've heard this story a few times, you'll be out there imaging or observing with someone, and you'll say, it's a beautiful, clear night tonight. Look how clear we've got it. And they say, yeah, it's pretty clear except for those clouds over there. And then you have to explain to them, they're not clouds, they're nearby galaxies. And that's funny, but that happened to you guys as well in the big blackout of 1977, I believe, in New York, where people actually called 911 because they thought the city was on fire because of this big trail of smoke across the sky that they'd never seen before. Oh, so Omega Centauri. Just for scale, that's Omega Centauri up there. And next slide, you can see it's big, right? You don't need any equipment to see that either. And that's Omega Centauri there. But you know, how boring are globular clusters? Well, you've seen one, you've seen them all. If I hadn't have shown you that last slide where it showed you the scale, a globular cluster is a globular cluster. But they do have some interesting science. They're kind of very mysterious scientifically. They're filled with old stars, but they don't follow the plane of our galaxy. So our galaxy is flat, the Milky Way is flat, but the globular clusters are all over the place. We don't know why, we don't know how they formed, we don't know how they evolved. They're a really strange object. So in that sense, they're very interesting scientifically. I should say how intimidating it is not to be here and talking or anything like that, but just showing images at NEAF to people who are experts in taking images. And so you guys probably already can see that my chip is tilted here and I have some out of focus stars there. So I'm going to admit to all of this stuff as I go. Now this shot is the large Magellanic Cloud with no special equipment, just a DSLR literally out the back door. So I've gone out the back door, put the DSLR there, done a few 30-second exposures, and caught a comet flying past the large Magellanic Cloud. Now I mentioned that I make my images public domain, so I take something like this, it's an event, I put it online, and the next day I had the editor from, or one of the article journalists from National Geographic take that image and publish it because he was doing a particular story on comets and that particular comet. Now, the elephant in the room, of course, is that you guys have Andromeda. I realise that Andromeda is the prototypical perfect specimen, and our specimen is not so perfect. It is the Danny DeVito of large galaxies. I get that. So fair's fair, you guys can have Andromeda. And I will point out here, this little green spot here is the Tarantula Nebula. And that's a really cool thing to see in our nearby galaxy, is that we can image the nebulas within another galaxy somewhere else. And if you just take an image with your camera, it shifts into the green. I don't know why it's green, because we know it's hydrogen, and we know if we process it correctly, it's actually quite red and beautiful. This is taken with the 11-inch RASA. And the good thing about Tarantula as well down the south is that it's circumpolar, so it's always at the pole. And you find this, especially on our astronomy forums and things like that, whenever you're having trouble with something else, having trouble with Orion or having trouble with Carina, or everyone's backup is always Tarantula. Tarantula's always there in the sky. But we need to go deeper. So around the LMC, around the Large Magellanic Cloud, there's a whole bunch of little nebulas, not just Tarantula. This is an example of the Dragon's Head Nebula. Obviously, a lot of star formation going on, old stars, new stars, and I don't know what's going on here. There's a star that's shedding stuff. It's just really, really fascinating. Not a common one, this one, but one that I really like. So I have a bone to pick with New York City. Do you guys know what this one's called? It's the Statue of Liberty Nebula. But you guys can't see it. So we've got an object that's named after one of your most iconic statues. It's like if I called the Heart and Soul Nebula the Great Barrier Reef Nebula. So I'm thinking about it. This is taken with a Celestron 9 1/4. But I think it should be called the Breakfast Club Nebula. Because I don't know about you, but this is uncanny. We've got the part of the hair, we've got the glove, we've got the lapel, we've got the belt, we've got the flick of the coat. It's uncanny. So I propose that if we rename this the Breakfast Club Nebula, then I won't rename the Heart and Soul Nebula the Great Barrier Reef Nebula. Now, over east, because we have this fantastic clear view out over the ocean, there's an effect that you normally only see from photos like Don Pettit's, where you're taking photos from the International Space Station, and you can see that thin sliver of atmosphere. And you can see that that thin sliver is glowing green. And that is our glow. That's the glow of our planet. And it's very hard to capture unless you have a super deep sky. And I'm lucky because I can see the horizon as well going out over east. So it's a very special phenomenon you can get with these wide-field Milky Way shots. So I want to talk quickly about the dark nebulas that we can see out there. This is Corona Australis, which I like because it's named after my country, the dark molecular cloud. There's so much going on in this nebula. It's big, it doesn't even fit into this frame, which is taken with, let me see, what's this one taken with? The RASA 11-inch, 30-second exposures, under an hour. So I've knocked this image out under an hour, which is what the RASAs are good for. And you can see up here, we sometimes call this guy Yoda. So that's Yoda's walking stick. He's holding a little walking stick there at his two eyes. And Australia literally means southern place. So here's a little map I found of the celestial sphere, just to give you an idea of where everything is. You guys can see all your northern stuff up here near the pole. Both of us can see Orion because it's near the equator there, the celestial equator. And they didn't actually have much stuff to put down here. So whoever did this map is probably from the Northern Hemisphere. But I thought that would give you some perspective anyway. This gives you an idea of how much stuff is just in that dense region. It's just nebulas galore. So when I think you guys call it the galaxy season coming up, and for us it just goes from nebula season to more nebulous season. It's pretty mental. And the next slide is Ophiucus. You guys see this one, but I think it's a bit lower on the horizon for you guys. So this is pretty easy to take photos of. This is just piggybacked, so not using a telescope, just a Canon 200mm lens, 30-second exposures. I think this one is tracking, but it's not guiding, so pretty simple. But let's go a bit deeper. So you can see same area, just in quite a bit. So that's taken with the Hyperstar and the Celestron 9¼ Edge HD. And notice how I am, throughout this presentation, I'm changing focal lengths. And often we get into the trap of buying a setup and just like adding so much stuff onto a setup. You get focuses and you get rotators and you get all this stuff. But that actually makes it hard to change, chop and change. And what I like to do is I change telescopes, I change cameras, I change focal lengths, use reducers, don't use reducers. You get much more diversity in your images. And even though I'm taking an image of the same region, it's like a completely different photo with a completely different kind of feel to it. And sometimes I don't use telescopes at all. This is the Coalsack Nebula, which is the head of the emu in Aboriginal culture. And this is my incredibly urban situation. I'm up against fences, there's a street light up here somewhere, and I've got palm trees in the backyard. Basically, I can't see the pole. All I can see is straight up and across over the neighbour's fence. But that gives you an idea of the kind of urban situation I have, even though I'm in hippie paradise Byron Bay. But it also means that I have a time pressure. So when I'm imaging, I really love the f2 imaging, and this is why I've done so many videos on RASA, why I was so quick to take up Hyperstar in the first place. I don't want to spend like the whole 12 hours overnight doing astronomy. I want to knock out an image in a few hours and go to bed because I have kids who are going to jump on me at 6 o'clock in the morning. This is not one of mine. This is by Corey Schmitz from South Africa, I believe. This is called the Dark Doodad, which is a very imaginative name for a dark molecular cloud. But again, I just wanted to show you that all of those dust lanes in and around the core of the Milky Way are super populated with all of these dark nebulas, and they can be just as fun to take photographs of as the big bright nebulas as well. So we get on to my girlfriend, Carina. I really love this photo. It's taken in the Hubble palette, but I didn't push the green as you sometimes naturally want to do in the Hubble palette. This is taken with the 11-inch RASA, and again, it's a photo I've just knocked out over one night, so one session. Now, to give you an idea of scale, Orion is about 1.5 times bigger than the Moon, and Carina is 4 times bigger than the Moon. And that's just the core sort of area as well. This stretches out way past the frame, and you can see that it's stretching out way past the frame here as well on the 11-inch. And this is just taken with 60-second exposures as well. I find with the RASA, I love to push it, so I love to do like 5-10-minute exposures on the RASA just to get some insane, faint stuff. But I find that blows out the stars, especially when you're in a region like this or a dense region of the Milky Way. All the stars tend to get really fat, so I tend to stick to 30 to 60 seconds. So this is the same area on the RASA 8, the new RASA 8. This has been such a great scope to get a hold of and play with, and you can see it still doesn't fit the whole of Carina, and this is at 400 millimeters. So if they want to fit in the whole of this object, they actually need to, I don't know, do a RASA 6-inch or RASA 4-inch, Nexstar 4-inch RASA. I don't know. It's a huge target, and I really, really love it. And I should say the reason I take okay photos is because I have this stuff which is just so bright, and I'm using gear like the RASAs. There's really no way I can go wrong. You could be doing this unguided if you wanted to. I tend to guide and dither and all that as well. But this can be unguided. It's pretty easy. The gear and the targets are doing all the heavy lifting for me. This is Carina in natural colour, taken with the 11-inch And you can obviously tell a natural colour image because you've got the blue stars and the orange stars. They all kind of get a bit weird when you're doing the narrowband stuff. But if you're closer to a city, narrowband is really your only option, which is why it's good to see that the RASA 8 will work with the narrowband filter draw system from Star Arizona. And I can see that that particular setup has been hugely popular already. So it's an option. You don't have to have dark skies like I do to take images like this. This image could have been taken, not this image, but the last narrowband one could have been taken from the middle of Sydney or New York. So we need to go deeper. This is Carina not taken with the RASA. This is Carina taken with the 9 1/4. So we're zooming in to the region here. And there's so much to look at. Even in this one target, it's just filled with different stuff. And so I've tried to annotate it to give you an idea of some of these things, because some of these areas are famous Hubble images as well. We've got the Dusty Mountains, the Treasure Chest, the Keyhole, Ida Car, and this one is a famous Hubble photo. That one's a famous Hubble photo. But I think my favourite Hubble photo from this region is God's middle finger. And that is a Bok globule as well, which was named after Bart Bok. Just a fantastic section. Now, in that same area, Ida Car itself is a fascinating star. It's a candidate like Betelgeuse for going supernova. They don't really know when it's going to go supernova. They just suspect, based on its age and the evolution of stars, that it should be due sometime soon. And in the 1800s, do I have the year here? 1843, it became the brightest star in the sky. So that was an event that was witnessed all around the Southern Hemisphere. And it's this flaring that happens. The star shed a bunch of stellar material and flared up and became the brightest star in the sky. And we can still see the remnants of that here. But that sort of a shot, I had to find one online because I haven't done this myself. It's on my bucket list. This is the sort of shot that you'd take the same way you do planetary, the same way if you were taking a photo of Jupiter or Mars. You'd be doing video imaging on this. So you'd want a really long focal length and try and find that star and then be taking video to stack the video. This is taken with a C14 Edge HD and an ASI 224 MC and taken by a Brazilian guy called Ivani Soares. He used a 1.5 minute video. And what's also special about this is that we now know it's going to be gone in 10 years. It would be really interesting to see someone animate this or take photos of this over the next 10 years and stitch them together in an animation, because we're seeing the last death throes of a star before it goes supernova. There's some argument, of course, as to if it goes supernova, will it have an effect on life here? The naysayers say it will wipe out our ozone layer and kill us all, but it would probably just look really cool and really cool to photograph, and I can't wait. This is another beautiful region of space, the Fighting Dragons of Ara. And this is also in the HST palette, so the Hubble Space Telescope palette. Taken with the Celestron RASA in 60-second exposures. It's about half the size of Carina, but still twice as big as the Moon. So it's bigger than Orion still, but not quite as bright as Orion. So a massive, massive area. But we need to go deeper because I'm changing focal lengths again. And that's the same region taken in true color. And you can see how different these photos look. They're the same thing, basically just different focal lengths and different color treatments, one in true color and one in the Hubble Space Telescope. So a little closer up. We have some famous galaxies. There is the Sculptor Galaxy there. I find galaxy work really hard, and I'm not a galaxy guy, as it were. But when you're taking photos of galaxies, you of course want to take the hydrogen alpha and lay that over your RGB, so you can see those beautiful red jewels popping out of your image, and you can get all that beautiful nebulosity coming through. We have this other weird galaxy called Centaurus A, or sometimes called the Hamburger Galaxy, and we're still arguing over what it is. It's really weird looking. It's not like any other galaxy. It's definitely not the Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's not the Danny DeVito even. It's just super weird. And it's really close, and it's close enough that we can study it quite well, and it has very strong radio emissions. But it might be, because it is this close, that we find it weird. Because unlike the other galaxies, which are quite distant, we've got a very good view of this one. And because of that, we can't figure out whether it's elliptical or regular or what it is. And this was discovered in Sydney in the 1800s by a Scotsman. But the only thing you'd discover in Parramatta these days is probably a hypodermic needle or a parking ticket. This is the Milky Way core. It's super dense. You guys can see this too, and I see images of M8, the Lagoon Nebula, and the Trifid coming from here. But again, just a little lower on the horizon for you, and it's just straight up for us, which makes it really easy to take photographs. And you can see the dense star field is just something to behold. This is Saturn running through here, M8 and M20. And it's when you're imaging like this and you put your guide camera on, there is no trouble picking a guide star. Your little guide camera is just full of stars. It's really quite something. This was taken with 30-second photos and a 200mm lens, so it's not even through a telescope. It's just riding piggyback on the CGX. Now, this is our South Celestial Pole. Do you notice anything different about our celestial pole compared to yours? The pole star. You guys have a bright star right in the middle, which makes it super easy for you guys to align your telescopes when you're at a star party. And we've got nothing. And I told you before how useless constellations are. When you're out, good luck finding octans. It's invisible. So we go out to star parties and we use all sorts of weird and wonderful methods. Of course, we've got our compasses out and we're trying to work out the offset, and we've got sticks in the ground to see the shadow at a particular time of day and work that out. But if you go to a star party in the Southern Hemisphere, everyone's screwing up on the first night, and by the second night they've got their polar alignment worked out and everything's running fine. But I do truly recommend the Celestron All-Star Polar Align method. That's always worked for me very well. So this is taken in Western Australia. You can see the large and small Magellanic clouds as little fluffy blurs there. And this is taken at the DSA-1 tracking station. I was lucky enough to be commissioned by the European Space Agency to go do some photography of their dish over there. And we've got a few good big dishes in Australia. And have you guys seen the movie The Dish? Know of it? If you haven't seen it, it's about the Apollo mission, and it's about the fact that when Neil Armstrong was stepping onto the moon, those live images were not coming to you direct from NASA, they were coming to you direct from Parkes, where the big dish is in Australia. Because any space agency needs to be in contact with their satellites all the time, there has to be at least 3 dishes on each side of the planet so that they can remain in contact. So Australia has a bunch of these dishes for various space agencies so we can remain in contact. And as Neil Armstrong came out of the module, our dish was at its limit. It was literally standing up on its side, and they just managed to make contact. And it's a very good movie. You should see it if you can. It's called The Dish. There's a whole bunch of moon's conspiracy theories about the tapes from that mission, and that they'd been doctored through Australia, and that we were sending computer graphics through, and it was all fake and all that. But a guy called John Sarkisian from the CSIRO won the Order of Australia, which is a medal from the Queen, for doing all the research to try and find where these missing tapes are from this mission. And they never found the missing tapes, but it could be, they think they've either been destroyed or it's at an ex-employee's house and they can't get a warrant to go get into this guy's house. So the moon conspiracy theorists obviously take that one to town. Speaking of the moon, I'm sort of known for moon photography, which is ironic because I kind of don't like the moon most of the time because I'm a deep space imager, but I have taken a few nice transit photos. Obviously you guys can see this here too, and you guys can do this too. But when I first got into astronomy, taking a transit photo was the furthest thing from my mind. I'd read about it in magazines, astronomy magazines and whatnot, but I thought, that's crazy. How could you possibly do this? It was like some sort of dark art. But then after a while, I got comfortable with using my gear and I tried it, and it worked. And I just couldn't believe it. So I have made videos about this and how you can do it as well. And it's really nice when people come up to me and they show me their transit photos and that I'd help them do that. This is one that is on exhibit this year at the Hudson River Gallery. So I'm actually exhibiting in New York, which is super weird as well. And Tim Peake was on the space station at that time. But this is probably my most famous transit image. This is the one that went viral and when people started to notice me a bit more and when I climbed the ranks of Google for the search Dylan O'Donnell. And it got picked up by mainstream media and it got retweeted by the International Space Station. Chris Hadfield was getting asked questions about it in interviews and stuff like that. It was really amazing. But I don't know why. I don't really know what makes something go viral, right? We don't expect to go viral and we don't know why it happens. I suspect it's something to do with the way the space station is positioned near the craters and near the Terminator, and also that I process the image in color as well. We're used to seeing very monochromatic images of the moon, but the moon has a very natural color that you can bring out quite easily just by pushing your processing a little more. So here is the moon at sunset for Stonehenge and New York. So you can see something weird. They look backwards, don't they? This is not the way we normally display them in classical literature and paintings and things like that. The moon normally is pictured like that. And that's not something I've just noticed. It's something that the Simpsons do as well. So it's always been a mystery where Springfield is, but astronomers have studied the Simpsons and we've worked out that it's in New Zealand. So all this time you guys have been saying that my photos of Orion and my photos of the moon are upside down. Turns out you guys have been upside down this whole time. This is a pretty stark contrast. This is the difference between the light pollution in America and Australia. You can see if you're in the middle of Australia, it's dry, so the skies are clear pretty much all the time, and there's no light not just near you, but for miles and miles. I'm lucky enough to live on the easternmost tip, so I'm about here, so I'm well away from the cities. Any light pollution in the town is you walk out the back door and out the fence and across the street and you're out of the light pollution, basically. It's very easy to photograph. This is the middle that I was talking about. So in the middle of Australia, we have Uluru, which is a big rock that we don't really understand. And it's a beautiful thing to photograph. Now, I was looking at traveling there to do photography like this, and I saw a Facebook ad that said that I could go on a tour there for $3,000. I thought, oh, that was interesting. And I clicked in and I read the fine print and it said, does not include flights. So I'm thinking, well, what's the $3,000 for? And I did some more research and found out that the rooms are only like $100 a night. So you don't need to spend $3,000 on a tour to get an image like this. You just go and get the $100 a night room, wait till it's dark, and walk outside. It seems like a bit of a scam. Anyway, this is Uluru. Also near Uluru, we have an American military base where we help America and New Zealand and Canada and England spy on all of your emails and store everything so that we are part of the Five Eyes spying and data collection. And we don't know when America comes in and out. They can just go and leave whenever they like. It's a very interesting part of the world. Also, you can get meteorites there. I've spoken to Jeff Notkin about this, the meteorite expert. If you walk out into the desert with a magnet, you will find meteorites. When meteorites fall by the coast or in wet areas, they rust and they'll disappear after a while. But here in the middle of Australia, not only will you go and find dark skies, if you just walk around with a magnet cane or a large magnet, you will find meteorites. Now, there are other things to contend with in Australia when doing astrophotography. This is a black and white bandy snake that I almost stepped on while going out to get a Milky Way shot. There's a green tree frog that I found on my Celestron tripod as I came out to check the imaging run. There's a python that was in my tool shed as I went to get a screwdriver. I've also had pythons on the fence next to me while I'm imaging that you just don't see until you turn on the light after the night's imaging. But they're mostly harmless, and they're harmless enough that I will trust my young boy, Zenon here. This is my son, holding an adult python with a broken arm. That's a pretty Australian photo, don't you think? But the other day I came out to my RASA and found that a giant bat had defecated all over the mirror. They eat these fruit berries and then they crap them out, and so a lot of people ask me how I cleaned it. And I cleaned it very, very carefully because if you scrape, you could have scratched the glass. And there's that same snake, which I said was harmless on the last slide, eating one of those fruit bats, which I don't mind at all. Now, I am mostly into pretty pictures, but I am doing an astronomy degree, and I do dabble in the sciencey side of things. So every night there is a list of objects that have been discovered, and this is happening right now, and this is a live website. I can give you the link if you need it. It's on the video about this. But the Minor Planet Center shows us the things that we've discovered moving in the sky each night. And any given night, there might be 20 or 30 things which are brand new to us, brand new to science. We've never seen them before. And it's hard. This list was hard to pass. It was just a list of numbers. So I thought, I'll take the numbers and I'll write some code and I'll make it so that we can actually see what's going on. Because I wanted to see if there was any of these things I could do follow-up observations for. But when I did it, I found something really interesting. And that was this huge bias in the data. I mean, the first bias is the fact that it's just a big strip, right? So that's a time of night. That's a time when they turn on the telescopes, do their survey work, and then turn them off for the night. That's one bit of bias. The other bias, of course, is that we have things clustered here around the equator. Huge cluster, a bunch up north, and a few little observations down south. So what's causing this bias in the data? And the bias is caused mostly because the two primary surveys now are Pan-STARRS and Catalina. So they're doing most of the heavy lifting for this, and you can see where they're located here. I should show you as well the locations here. We have, this is obviously happening around those survey locations in Hawaii and America. That white dot there is where I am, so I could tell if I could follow up on any of these. And the yellow bar here is where Bruce Willis is at any time, in case we need him to deflect a meteorite. And that's funny, right? But if you look at this graph, Armageddon the movie came out here. And funding, Congress suddenly said, we need funding to find out where all of this stuff is, because they became suddenly concerned about the impact of asteroids over 1,000 meters or 1 kilometer. They reckon they found about 80%, which doesn't comfort me too much. The funding continues, but unfortunately my country just dropped out, and for political reasons, politicians want to divert money to other things. I think our government's spending $250 million on advertising themselves this year. So that's funding that was pulled from CSIRO, our space agency, our science organisation, and funding for that blind spot. Because this is a blind spot. In the Southern Hemisphere, there is a gap in the data that you can see there where there could be things happening. There could be asteroids that we haven't discovered. There could be potentially hazardous asteroids that would change life on this planet that we simply can't see. And that's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me. It's an opportunity for any astronomer in the Southern Hemisphere. A friend of mine, Terry Lovejoy, has a Celestron 14 with Hyperstar, and he discovers comets from his backyard. He's discovered 5 or 6 now. And the reason he can discover them is because he doesn't have to compete with the big surveys, because he is exploiting that gap in the data. And the other thing to note is that if you discover a comet, you get your last name after it. So it's Comet O'Donnell or Comet whatever. And it's there in perpetuity for history. Every time this comet comes back, long or short, it's named after you. Now, I did propose that what we could do as astronomers is go to companies like McDonald's or Coke and convince them to fund an observatory. Because if they found a comet and it was called the McDonald's Observatory, they would get the credit. And then for history, they would be called, Comet McDonald's or whatever coming through. And I had people who were absolutely horrified at this suggestion. And a lot of professional colleagues just said, that's disgusting. And I sort of said, well, I don't really care who's paying for it. If you can trick a company into paying for astronomy gear and searching for the missing 20% of asteroids which may or may not cause extinction on this planet, that's fine by me. I don't really care what the asteroid's called at all. So anyway, my name is Dylan O'Donnell. You can find me on Instagram. You can find my videos on YouTube. I run a festival in the Southern Hemisphere called Star Stuff, where you can come down and see the southern night sky and hear lots of cool speakers as well. I'll take some questions, but remember, everything is meaningless and we're all going to die. Is there a format for questions? Do you just sing out, or? You've got a question up the back here.
When you say true color, are you doing LRGB or are you using a one-shot color camera?
So what I tend to do is a trick with one-shot color, but then I use HA as the detail layer, so the luminance layer. So I tend to use HA RGB. You just get way more detail that way, yeah. That's the way I tend to do all my true color images. Often in the same night, yeah, because I'm imaging at f2, so you just swap the camera. I'll use the same setup, take the hydrogen alpha narrowband mono camera off and put the RGB camera on, and that works great. It's a real kind of shortcut, yeah. Any other questions? Yep.
Obviously, there's this real northern hemisphere bias like we were talking about with an SEA catalog and how that came about. And you said that you just look for NGC codes in the southern hemisphere. Have you ever thought about making just a southern hemisphere catalog?
That would be cool, yeah. We could have a catalog that excludes all of you guys and just have our stuff in it. I like that idea.
Like, comparable objects, the faint fuzzies that you don't need heavy gear to find. You say, oh, this is, O'Donnell 1, O'Donnell,
The O catalog. I am so into that idea. No, I think that's an excellent idea. Thank you for that. I think there's another question up there somewhere. No? Are we done for questions? I think that's it. Thank you very much. Oh, one more. I cannot image from New York. I don't know how you guys do it. Thank you very much, guys.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dylan. Great job. Great job. Thanks.